then
No,
please feel free to.
Is that your right to prepare?
Welcome to back to Senate Education.
No, I already sent
Mr.
it
Nichols,
in.
do you want to have a
You
seat at
signed
the
it, right? Yeah,
table?
you signed it. Someone commented on your.
And of course,
signature.
John, you're more than
Yeah.
welcome to sweat me as well.
Yeah.
Like to.
You're gonna-
Yeah.
So we are, we have here School Safety and Teaching Vermont campaign, and I know Mr. Nichols was called me yesterday, gonna give just a brief sort of few words on the school safety situation, response to the bill, and then we're gonna jump into the Teaching Vermont campaign and go from there. So with that, the floor is yours.
Okay, for the record, Jay Nichols, Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association. The school safety bill that Secretary French has testified on, I think Sonny Erickson also testified.
And yeah, a couple other people.
Okay.
We had yesterday.
So we've been talking about the bill, and by we, I mean Vermont NEA, Vermont School Boards Association, individuals from the state organizations, state safety organization. And Rob Evans is the main representative from there. He works for Margolis Healy, which is a firm that works with the Agency of Education on school safety. And as we talked about some of the things that were in the bill, it's really kind of like the same bill that was in 2018, and then we had COVID come along before anything would happen with that. So as we discuss this, there are some things in there that need to change. And I think we're all in agreement that they need to change. And so what we're asking
I'm
for,
sorry, are you saying there are things in the bill that you're clearly disagree with?
there are things in the bill that we all clearly know need to change. I'll give you one real concrete example. There's language in there about policy development,
Yeah,
and it talks about August 1st.
okay.
Well, if the session gets done in May, the school board associations or the AOA, usually it's the school boards, has to write a model policy.
Yeah.
There's no way it could be implemented by August 1st because schools don't usually meet in July. So it's some things like
Yeah, I
that.
understand.
And, so we want to meet on that, and we have a representative, David Manning, Principal Johnson Elementary. The superintendents have a representative, Brooke Olson Farrell, who's the superintendent of Slate Valley. And we're all kind of on the same page that we want to work on this together, give input. Today, there was a conversation with Emily Simmons of the AOE. So there's going to be a meeting of all of us to kind of look at this and try to bring it together in a way that when we bring it to you, we can say, okay, we think it kind of makes sense now. Here might be an area that the principals don't necessarily agree with, or Vermont EA might want to give you some information on. But right now, we don't think we're at the point of doing that. If we could kick it back to like next Thursday or something.
Yeah, hey,
It would be better.
next Thursday or Friday at the latest, I would
Yeah,
say.
Sue's gonna be out of state on Wednesday, and
Okay.
she's our best school boards on this. I'd like to
Okay.
see her be able to be here if possible. So Thursday or Friday,
Okay,
we can make
and you'll
it.
be able to bring something in, and then we can take additional testimony the following week and maybe.
That's the whole, right, exactly.
Couple of weeks.
Exactly. And you were gonna ask us some questions about current practice, and I was just gonna say that essentially right now we have Title 16, 1481, which just lays down fire drills and how you have to have at least one a month. And then the AOE puts out a memo every year that says, hey, this month do a fire drill, the next month you can do a lockdown or whatever. And the whole idea of this is to put this into statute so that when a memo comes out and when there's adjustments, the statute won't have to change. So the law will just say, refer back to the student advisory group recommendations or whatever. So that's what we're trying to get to. So we don't have to change the law every time we want to do something a little bit different. That's the genesis behind what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, we have Beth St. James in next Thursday at 2:10. Just take us through and help us understand exactly what you're talking about. What's
Good.
in the books now, side by side?
Perfect.
What are we trying to do with the bill? Where are some of the problems, et cetera?
Perfect.
Great.
Okay. So
So Teach in Vermont campaign.
we've been talking about this at the DPA for a couple of years. We're talking about it during COVID. It just, we were just basically in survival mode.
Yeah.
And as we look at the national numbers, we've been discussing it internally. And first of all, essentially, I think the problem statement is that what do we need to examine in order to address effectively? And I think there's a two-pronged problem. Is that fewer people are going into teaching? So that's one end of it.
Nationally? That's
Nationally
okay, I just
and in
wanna make
Vermont.
sure. Okay.
Nationally and in Vermont. And in my
You have
testimony,
those stats?
yes, in
Okay,
my testimony, I'm giving you some stats.
thank you.
So essentially, and there's fewer people staying in the profession. So this is leading to a pipeline of less qualified candidates. Go ahead.
Could you quantify that a little bit though? I mean,
Yeah, so at the end of my testimony, a little historical perspective of this issue. In 1970-71, the number of bachelor's degrees in education from post-secondary institutions was 176,307. Okay. In 2019-20, which is the last year we have records for, it was 85,057. That's a 48%, I articulate that in my testimony, deduction in the number of individuals attaining bachelor's degrees for the teachers. So not only are people staying in the field less time, and are people leaving sooner than they've left in the past, on average, we also have almost 50% less people actually looking to enter the field.
And our population has gone up.
Well, we get 51 million or 59 or 49 million, 51 million, somewhere in that range of students across the country. The number is hard to quantify because so many kids just kind of fell off the radar during the COVID period. So a lot of states, and including us, didn't do as good a job necessarily as tracking kids as you did in the past. So numbers are kind of fuzzy, but overall we have around 50 million students in our K-12 system in the United States.
say the number again.
Around 50 million.
K-12.
K-12 in the United States. That's not counting preschool. That's right. K-12, 50 million. So, I guess another testimony here, but basically what we're saying is nationally about half the teachers leave. It's around 44%. And I give you a survey in here that shows that research. And then I give you a article from a live link from PBS that talks about why teachers are leaving the field earlier. That there's not the retention that there used to be, so that's in here.
You want to summarize what they said? I mean, can you
Well,
just kinda give us-
they basically say in terms of people leaving, it's really about the kind of, I think I told you this before, it's kind of like there's a kind of an attack on public education that's gone on for quite a while, and teachers are getting asked to do more and more than they had to do in the past. Test scores were starting to be used against teachers, and teachers are just saying, why do this? I might have mentioned this committee. There's a representative in the building who told me his son just quit teaching the other day, and his son's one of my son's best friends. I didn't even know that he quit teaching. He's been teaching for 15, 16 years. He said, I can't do it anymore. Just can't do it. It's too hard.
Do you sense this is, so younger generation is expected to have more career mobility? Is this different? Is this a different?
I think it is.
Different statistics than I don't know, engineering or?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
I'm just, because this
Yeah.
is, I was with a colleague the other day, and I just want to make sure we're just working and the real numbers here.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
because, yeah, to Senator Weeks's question, people are changing jobs all the time.
Yep.
I mean, all the time,
Yep.
much more than they did, my parents' generation.
And we do have some, I don't want to say older, we do have some second or third career people that are coming to teaching. The problem is that number is so small, it's not meeting the need of what we have across the country. When we look at our data that we have for people that apply for positions, you can talk to any superintendent state about this, especially if they've been around a while,
Yeah.
principal. When I was superintendent of Essex, like I mentioned before, I'd have 200-300 applicants for
Right.
a second grade job. Now you talk to Beth Cobb, who's a superintendent now, and she'll tell you that they might have, 20, and that's Essex. Where I live, Berkshire, they might have 1 or 2 qualified applicants apply for the job, and sometimes they have 0. Literally, nobody applies for a job. We have jobs that are open right now, high school and elementary teaching jobs in the state of Vermont that there are no applicants for. And so they're covering with subs and, whatever they can do to try to get by. So, and I think that's all part of that whole national narrative. And the other thing about Vermont, I know you all know this, is we're old. Our lowest demographic is our 19 to 44-year-olds. And those are the people that have babies. Those are the people that are paying taxes. I mean, I know we all pay taxes, but those are the people that we need in Vermont. Right now, we don't have that. So part of what we're asking for to be thinking about in this campaign for Vermont Concept is how do we start attracting those people? And then we've got some concrete steps here that we think could be used towards that. And I'll just share them and answer any questions. And this is not rocket science stuff that we're coming up with. We think there should be a website with a Teachers for Vermont campaign. We think it should be funded so that it's done right and looks good and sharp, and that the AOE and the DOL should have responsibility over that. And we think there should be a person that's hired at the AOE level that oversees that, or somebody transferred from another position at the AOE. And they should provide licensing support for teachers seeking to move to Vermont. I get complaints all the time from people that want to become principals or teachers in Vermont. They say, it's too cumbersome. You know, I'm not gonna bother. I'm only gonna be here for a couple of years. My spouse is in the military. I'm over here now. You know, it's too hard. So how do we make that simple?
Well, maybe really revise licensing.
Well, the thing about licensing too, there is a federal bill. I don't know where it is in Vermont. There's a federal approach from the National Association of Elementary School Principals to get 48 states to sign on to a real reciprocity, like we do with doctors. If I'm a doctor and I've got a doctor's license to be a cardiac doctor in New Hampshire, when I moved to Vermont, I don't know if it jumps to a bunch of, oops, I'm already a cardiac doctor. And in this state, we do. I hired a principal when I was a superintendent out of Boston. And on one side of him, I mean, he was in the tough communities of Boston. He had the Crips and the Bloods and a metal detector and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I hired him, and Vermont made him take like 3 or 4 classes. He'd been a principal for 9 years on the toughest districts in the United States. And he had to take like 3 classes in Vermont to be a Vermont principal. Because there's no real.
Yeah, I mean, it would be helpful. I mean.
Yeah,
say
so that's
something,
one.
But we can dig into that.
We can dig into that.
But also, again, I've mentioned this, there is research out there that shows, you know, again, going through, and we're going to pull this apart a little bit next week, we're going to hear from UVM and the state colleges on teacher education programs. Some people just don't get jazzed up by them, you know, they want something, and for them to go to teacher education programs isn't what they want.
Yeah.
They want to study biology, they want to study a foreign language, they want to be the historian in the classroom.
Right.
So they want to study history and then get certified.
Right.
And the research also shows some people can do this job and some people can't. You observe a good teacher, you know what a good
Absolutely.
teacher looks like.
20 minutes
And
in.
so the
man.
nonsense,
Yeah.
in my opinion, of sometimes making people jump through all these things, it's, you know, and I know there are a lot of people that say, oh, we've got to make sure the independent school teachers go through. But we know a teacher, it's a gift. I mean, you
Well,
there are
it's a
people that can
gift. There's
do
an
it.
art and there's a science to it though, because I think.
Tiny bit I can show you that percentage, you know, and I'll pull up the Dartmouth study. It was interesting coming up, and it was a Hamilton report that shows no matter how much effort you put in,
Yeah.
if you're good, you know, it really just goes up a little bit, you know, when you do this sort of teacher education stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
but
so it's interesting.
what I want to get to was Marzano.
Okay,
Marzano's research, Marzano's probably the most famous education researcher in the country, Bob Marzano. And his research says 4 to 1. Pedagogy is 4 times more important than content. You give me somebody who really knows pedagogy, knows how to work with kids, and knows chemistry pretty well.
Yeah.
They can be a hell of a chemistry teacher.
Yeah.
You get somebody who knows chemistry out of this roof but can't connect with kids, they will not be effective.
Nope.
It goes to what you're talking about.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Totally concur with that.
Yeah. So what we want that person who wants to be in that classroom, no matter
Absolutely.
how they kind of get there.
Yeah,
And the best
I
of
want
both
alternate
worlds
ways
would
to
be
do
a chemist, you know, the person that really wants to teach chemistry and is
Yeah.
also just great and wants to be in
Yeah.
that classroom.
Yeah, we don't disagree with that. You know, and also, so on that website whole thing, we've also talked about marketing, pushing across social media and selling Vermont is a great place to teach and learn. We would like to have somebody hired at the AOE that's kind of has some HR expertise. Right now, every school district will call about a licensing issue, and sometimes they get a different answer depending on who they're talking to. Have somebody out of state that happens, superintendents complain all the time about that, as do principals. We also put in here, we think we need to coordinate teacher preparation programs in Vermont and guide and incentivize these future teachers to teach and stay in Vermont. So we have a kid from, I just met 3 kids out on the hallway from Middlebury. Now, they're all economics majors, so they're not gonna be teachers. But if they were education majors, then we ought to approach those kids and say, listen, if you stay in Vermont and you teach in Vermont for X years, here's how we're gonna incentivize you. And we have some suggestions in here, like helping pay some of their college loan,
Yeah.
or maybe there's bonuses,
Yeah.
anything like that. And then we come to those kids. And when I say we, I mean the colleges, say to them, listen, you can walk into a job at Fairhaven High School. Next year, we'll interview you and stuff. Now, if you stay here, not only are you gonna get paid on the salary, whatever the salary is, but also we're gonna take care of your college loans, or we're gonna help you with buying a house or whatever it might be. Because we get those young kids to stay here and have families here. We're helping deal with 2 major problems that we have. One is our shrinking population and you know how old we are as a population, and then secondly, having people that come into the field of education. And when people buy homes, they stay. Yeah, when they rent, not as much. So
Please,
go ahead.
So just curious, these incentive programs, are you really targeting a specific demographic, like recent graduates or?
No, but on that one thing we were talking about, target them while they're still in school.
I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering overall,
No,
if you're kind of like strategically targeting a demographic.
no,
Okay.
no, I don't think we are. I think it's like people that really want to teach. Hey, man, Vermont's the best place to teach. We got the smallest class sizes. We got a great thing going here. You want to teach here. You know, we'll take care of you. Come to Vermont, be a teacher in Vermont. Because everybody's studying over the same number of people. And we've got some disadvantages. We pay less than some states around us. And our retirement system is worse than all the states around us. So we've got to find ways to, and I don't see a quick fix for either one of those things necessarily. So
Well, we are taking testimony. I don't see it. listed
minimum
in
salary.
yours.
I heard.
Yeah, next week. I mean, does it make sense? I mean, I wanted to pull apart, and you raised it maybe in health and welfare, and then you mentioned it in this committee. What does it take for, husband and wife to move here, both teachers right out of college with some student debt? We heard, maybe it was from you, salaries in
Yeah.
schools can be as low as $30,000.
Yeah. Not livable.
Not livable for one, if not the most important job out there, one of the most important jobs out there. So should we just have a conversation where Vermont says, listen, at minimum?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer, but I
Some
think
states have done that.
it's worth having that conversation.
And Don's sitting behind me, so I'll be careful, but we could even talk about a statewide teachers
Yeah.
Statewide teachers.
contract. And a statewide principal's contract.
Yeah.
Um,
And that, former Speaker of the House who had he was my rep, Ralph Wright, he always pushed for that.
Yeah.
Or he was in my, he
Yeah.
was in my rep.
yeah, I've testified in favor of it several times.
Yeah.
Last time I did, George Cross yelled at me. So I haven't since then. That was a while ago, I guess. He was a representative from Winooski or Senator from Winooski back then. And then, a couple of things we have in here, and you can read this on your own, but move or expand the remote employee incentive program to educators from out of state. So instead of saying, we're gonna hire you, come to Vermont, you can work remotely, which a lot of people can't because our broadband still has a lot of issues. Let's say to people, you come from Vermont, you move here, you agree to stay here for 10 years, or 5 years, we'll give you $10,000. Now come here and teach for 5 years, leave Kansas, come to Vermont, be effective for 5 years, show that you're a good teacher, nobody's trying to get rid of you, and boom, you get a $10,000 bonus. I mentioned the college loan forgiveness. And the other thing that we hear a lot is supporting new to Vermont teachers and paying for housing. I don't mean necessarily giving them money, but we hear from teachers all the time that they go to a bank, and Don can talk about this probably more than I do, to try to buy a home, and they see what they're making, and so immediately they get a higher interest rate, and they're less likely to get their loan approved. But we should find ways to try to break down those regulations, say, listen, this person's gonna be a teacher, they're serving our kids in the future. If they're a teacher, they're probably gonna stay. Are there some ways, and I'm not a banking expert, are there some ways to make sure that the interest they have to pay on their loans is not as high as it would be for somebody else with that kind of income? So ways to help protect them.
You're onto something there. I don't know what it is, but I
Me
know
either.
some colleges and universities, what's that?
Me either.
College and university, I think Williams College just south of Bennington does it. New faculty, new staff, if they want to buy something, Williams jumps in and helps in some way
So Los Angeles is doing that with some of their teachers too.
to kind of say,
No
all right,
school district can do that. That'd have to be a state thing, Vermont. We're just too small.
yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
if interest rates are set by the federal government, or rather the federal bank, how can the state influence who gets exclusive?
That's why we have senators
Yeah,
to work on those issues.
yeah.
I honestly don't know the answer.
Yeah, I think it could be challenging when you look at, if you can prove, and I think this would fall into the category, if you can prove a compelling state interest of supporting one specific group of people, yet having everyone else having to deal with the higher interest rates. There could be challenges there, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're
State
right.
troopers will want it too.
There
Well,
was.
what's,
Yeah,
State troopers
yeah,
will want it too.
what's the number one
Yeah.
job, according to the Department of Labor and McClure Foundation, to announce Vermont's highest demand promising jobs? I put the link in here for you. Number one job, it's not even close, is teaching. And ironically, when the governor talked about the McClure Foundation, he mentioned a whole bunch of jobs. He never mentioned educators. He mentioned carpenters and things like that, which is fine, but the number one job, Vermont's highest demand promising job,
Yeah.
according to our own Department of Labor and McClure Foundation, is teaching. And I give you the link to that too, and our VPA statement about that, which the governor didn't like.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that's because the governor recognized that the Senate Committee on Education had his back.
Yeah, good. And I have a great relationship with the governor, and I like John. We disagree on this. I think we need to realize how important this is. If we really want to be the education state, we need to invest in education, and then we need to try to get people to come here. Otherwise, we're gonna have 60,000 kids 10 years from now, instead of 80,000 kids. And where we're gonna be as a state? What's our future gonna look like as a state? If we don't invest now, we are in trouble.
You can't say we don't invest. I mean, look at our school.
I'm not saying we don't invest. I shouldn't have said that word. I'm just saying, these are things that we need to invest in.
Yeah.
So have
Right,
return on investment.
strategically make
Exactly.
certain moves that could make a difference.
Exactly.
And we could see a real difference in a few years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Committee questions? Mr. Nichols.
You did not include pension stability and the issues that the legislature and administration consider. Just
We testified on that last year, and we can talk about that at any time. We really think that's important. In fact, I testified on so much, there was Beth Pierce and I on both opposite sides of that issue. We felt that with this Teach for Vermont campaign, we should probably have 3 or 4 things that we think could really help, really soon, and try to focus on those 3 or 4 things so that if your committee decided you want to do some type of committee bill on it, you could have something you could really put your teeth around and actually make happen. So we didn't touch the pension thing. We have some concerns about the pension and the latest thing going on the health side related to the pension, but we decided to leave that completely out of it.
understood.
Great. Really appreciate it. This gives us a starting point. I'll talk to Ledge Council. We'll see if we can get something up, some language.
So we don't want me to write the bill, because last time I did, Beth St. James just ripped it all apart, and made it so much better, made me feel bad.
Never our intention.
Nah, she's great.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing all of you.
Mr. Ross. All right, we're just at the end of the table for closing arguments.
Senator Dooley, may I borrow that statement? I noticed you were, you're thinking about becoming a teacher, right?
I don't know about that.
that.
So it is, and I want the press and anybody else watching, it really is unique. I think you're probably the first student that's been in this position where you have, I just want to make sure these guys are, no, that's okay. Yeah, a little teacher, yeah. Can I see you outside? Somebody here for Act 70, that's doing Act 77, flexible pathways, and serving as a committee assistant and getting credit for it, getting paid for it, senior in high school at Spalding. And so we want, when we can, hear from you, because it's like having Senator Gulick, who's in the classroom, and others who have children, experience. Everybody brings something different and unique and important to the table. So, right. We talked a little bit about proficiency learning last week, and it's interesting that it didn't come up over the past couple of years when I was a chair, or at least I didn't sort of jump onto it, where it's sort of proficiency versus standards versus requirements. And I'm wondering if you could just give us some perspective as a student, what proficiency learning is like for you, what it is, and just sort of kick off this conversation for us, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, thanks.
For the
So
record, introduce yourself.
for the record, Hayden Ross, student at Spalding High School in Barrie. In all of your packets, you have a chart that looks like this. If you wouldn't mind getting that out, it compares traditional grading system, aka alphanumeric, to the standards-based system in this, which is pretty much just proficiency. You can especially highlight on the right side the things that I really think are different in alphanumeric and proficiency is that only items meant to measure achievement are recorded between the two. So in your traditional alphanumeric, you would have quizzes, homework assignments, and assessments all accumulated in your final grade, versus in our proficiency, we have more just the assessments that are actually put in the grade book. And I think that it certainly hammers in, I don't want to say laziness, but it promotes students to only do the bare minimum on the assignments that are not assessments, because they're not in the grade book, they're not being graded. and it's almost busy work just until you get to the assessment. I think that's one flaw.
Can you just go a little, let's pull that apart for a second. So as a high school student, give us what that looks, so you're in English class or math class.
Sure.
And so you're not getting quizzes, you're not, I mean, tell us what that day-to-day looks like.
Sure. So each day we'll get daily assignments.
Okay,
For example, I'll use my AP US government class.
okay,
We'd get a daily assignment, a slideshow, maybe fill it out about a Supreme Court case, Tinker v. Des Moines. Fill it out, take all these notes, watch videos about it, turn it in. It's not graded back to us though.
okay.
It's kind of just checked off. And then on a weekly sort of basis, my school, not high schools across the state, we've been starting to do these formative assignments, if you will. It's kind of like a quiz, but same thing. It doesn't really factor into your overall grade. The formative is to make sure that you have the understanding of the week's content. It's put in the grade book. And if you have a majority of the formatives as meeting the expectation, then you can get above a partially proficient in a class. It's a lot. I know it's a lot to take in. So if you have below in those formatives, the only grade you can get in the class is partially proficient, which is a 2.5 to your GPA, and it's just the bare minimum for passing.
Okay.
And then obviously on the bi-weekly or monthly basis, you'll have the big assessment that does go into the grade book, and it can cover multiple standards.
So maybe it's a silly question, because I'm just thinking of my own perspective. So when you get that thing back from the AP history class, is it marked up? Is the problems, these are the concerns, that sort of thing?
On the assessments, yes,
Okay,
not on the daily assignments.
so you just get it back with either a check on it or, okay,
Or don't even get it back at all.
okay,
Yeah, yeah. Which, you know, from a student's perspective, you have to understand that these are teachers who are having at most 80 students submitting all these assignments a day.
Yeah,
And it's not really possible to grade all of them.
yeah, sure.
Which so it might be just out of their control, but it's important to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Another thing that I attached into all these packets was this virtual high school learning course catalog. This is something that is alphanumeric based. It's not proficiency. It's something that we have at my school at Spalding. These are virtual classes. You can flip through them. I think there's 200 and something of them. Just to highlight a couple, I mean, you have AP Latin, there's Mandarin, constitutional law, all these different course offerings that aren't traditionally offered at high schools in the state. And I think it's really important to allow students to get this really broad range of course offerings. As we know, we just talked about how we have a teaching shortage in the state. And this is something that can not supplement that, but help students try and fulfill their desires while also earning academic credit.
so your high school somehow subscribes to this service?
Yes, yeah,
And you can get on and take one of these classes?
Yes.
For free?
correct. And I know for certain that the high school has to pay, virtual high school,
Sure.
obviously.
Yeah,
But I know that throughout the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about really investing in virtual learning, whether we're going to just really go for it or not. But I think that if we are going to invest in virtual learning, then VHS has to get to all corners of the state. Executive Director Hallquist was in last week talking about digital equity. And I think this is a really big piece of that. If we can't have broadband in all the schools, then how are kids in Cala going to have the same virtual high school course offerings as kids that go to CVU?
have you taken any of these?
I have, and I'm actually started one today. American Popular Music to supplement one of my graduation requirements.
Okay.
Yeah. To continue on, I think that we need to get the word out about dual enrollment, which is sort of building that more harmonious bridge between proficiency-based grading and alphanumeric grading in college. I think it's a real wake-up call to students when they go from being able to, I didn't mention this earlier, on all of the proficiency assessments at my school, at least, you can retake them enough times to get to where you need to be in the standard. But I think that dual enrollment would make it a more harmonious bridge between the, I don't want to say ease, but the ease of proficiency-based grading in high school versus alphanumeric in college. When you get that first F, it's not going to feel good. So I've taken dual enrollment classes myself. I thought they were really interesting, and they got students exposed to the college atmosphere while also exposing them to that alphanumeric grading scale, where every assignment matters and you have to give it your all 100% of the time.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Mr. Tini, how long has the proficiency stuff been around now?
Since about 2014.
Yeah, right around there, 13-14 school year it became law, and so, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe even before that, maybe that was just.
That was the first time I showed up in Digger.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I like to highlight a couple of the good things that I know my school is doing. I don't think other schools are doing across the state. Is we're doing progress reports every 3 weeks, and then these things called callback days and pass days. So PAS stands for Plan for Academic Success. If a student is not meeting the benchmark requirement in a class over the course of this 3-week period, they'll be given a score of below or unsatisfactory in a progress report. And then after that 3-week period, we have this Tuesday called the pass day, which is a half day, where students who are meeting the expectations get to go home early. And then students who are not have to stay for the afternoon and meet with their teachers to create a plan to go over the things that they're not doing well in and how they plan on fixing that. And if students go to all these pass days who are not meeting the standard, at the end of the semester, they can go to this day called callback day, which is a day where students who are really close to meeting, partially proficient or proficient, can come back in and work on those last things to get them to the standard, versus kids who have not taken the initiative to go to those days and have just like not attended them. They won't get that opportunity and they'll fail.
Senator Cool, did you teach under this system, or were you?
Yes, but I'm not an expert.
Okay.
Just something,
Please.
just for my grandsons.
Yeah.
My grandson goes to school, and he's a freshman this year, and they have the same type of thing.
Mhm.
So there's at least one of those
Okay,
schools where they come back for callback. And he's one of those kids that has to come back and get extra because he can be a little lazy.
Yeah, and there shouldn't be a stigma attached to it either.
No, yeah.
No, yeah.
He will, don't worry. You could just leave his email address. Can you say something about Act 77, how that's working at your school?
Right, yeah,
Yes,
so,
that's what, and we'll take some testimony on flexible pathways, but tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, so Act 77, work-based learning. It's supposed to be available to all students, usually juniors and seniors, who are starting to figure out their mindset and desired career paths. They can take a course where they get academic credit for being somewhere that is not school. So for example, a lot of my peers are at the hospital doing an allied health rotation. Some of them are at local elementary and middle schools because they want to be teachers, which is really great.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah. Give them hands-on experience in the classroom to see if they like it or not. Hopefully they like it. And I and a few of my peers this year, we're done with all of our academic requirements. So that would allow us to be gone for the whole day. Usually the kids who don't though, they're just gone for a block of the day, which is about an hour and 15 minutes. You can really get creative with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody dialing it in?
Could you elaborate?
Not getting creative, just kind of, I mean, I've heard, there's a mix out there, where, some schools I've heard, they might not be as focused on it.
Right.
I've heard from friends in college.
I don't think in my school.
Okay.
I think the standards and requirements are being met.
Okay.
Actually, this Friday, my work-based learning coordinator is going to come in here and assess me and talk over things, look at what I've been doing. Yeah. So I think we're really organized in that matter.
Be great to have him or her say a few words.
Yeah.
While they're here.
Okay.
Yeah. Even if we go until 6. Any questions for Mr. Ross?
6, right in. Just joking.
questions? It's helpful, very helpful. Yeah, appreciate this. Yeah, a good overview. And I'll ask Beth St. James to come in and talk a little bit about the history of proficiency-based learning legislatively and see if we can understand it a little bit more.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great, appreciate it.
Thanks, Hayden.
Yeah, thank you. Committee, any final questions?
Is Mr. Timmy speaking or?
No, I think he was
No,
just,
just-
I mean, you're more than welcome to. I don't know if you have
I mean, I have.
a particular topic
I
or.
can put my prepared remarks into the.
No, if you have
next week.
prepared remarks, please.
It's on the school safety issue, so I don't know if you want time wise.
Yeah, no, please, yeah.
He makes us stay really late, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 6 yet.
He's got a.
Keeps us after
Toughest
anyway.
chair in the whole place.
What's that?
He's got a reputation, being toughest chair in the whole place.
Yes,
true.
Yeah, right.
It's funny as committee, you're happy, yeah.
I did,
Works
sorry, I did
hard.
send this Hayden in time, but I couldn't. I can do that as soon as I get my fax machine warmed up, so. So for the record, I'm Don Tinney, a 31-year veteran English teacher from South Hero, currently serving as president of Vermont NEA. I've also served on the Vermont School Crisis Planning Team since 2018, but I want to be clear, I'm not a spokesman for that body. And so while representatives for BSBA, VSA, VPA, along with Vermont NEA Executive Director Jeff Fannin will be addressing the specific policy issues with school safety legislation, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some general ideas about the critical topic. So in a webinar with a former Secret Service psychologist, members of the school crisis planning team learned that a healthy school climate is the single most effective strategy to prevent school violence. When every school is a sanctuary for every student, all students feel as if they belong to their community, a school where they are safe and welcomed. In their 2021 report titled Averting Targeted School Violence, the U.S. Secret Service pointed out that in every case, tragedy was averted by members of the community coming forward when they observed behaviors that elicited concern. The report stated that students are best positioned to identify and report concerning behaviors displayed by their classmates. While it is important to have policies in place that promote school safety, we also know that the practice of see something, say something within the student body is a proven strategy to avert tragedy. That is why we must be committed to generating and maintaining a welcoming and safe school climate where all students have healthy interactions with their educators as they build trusting relationships with the adults in their lives. Dr. Robert Waldinger, director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, has concluded that positive relationships are essential to human well-being, and good relationships keep us healthier and happier, period. He also states in his latest book that a teen's relationships with adults may be more critical than at any other time in life. We need to assure that no policy nor practice will interfere with the invaluable relationship between students and their educators. This, by the way, is one of the reasons we must solve the problem of educator vacancies, because so many of our educators are overextended and stressed because they must cover the responsibilities ordinarily covered by other educators. And as a result, might miss the opportunity to have those important conversations with their students. Representing nearly 12,000 active Vermont educators, I'd like to call your attention to the options-based response section of the proposed legislation. I believe you heard the logic in moving from traditional lockdowns to an option-based response in earlier testimony, and learned that the classroom teachers will be deciding what option to exercise in the event of a threat to school safety. Please note that this is a major change in strategy and has caused increased levels of stress and anxiety among many of our educators. In a traditional lockdown, an educator follows the directive of the administrator or law enforcement official, lock the doors and windows, pull the shades, turn off the lights, gather students in the safest corner of the room. And while these lockdown drills are nerve-wracking for educators, who are reminded each time that they have the lives of their students in their hands, individuals are following basic directives. In the options-based system, educators must make split-second life or death decisions with very little information. I'm sure you can appreciate the dilemma our educators will face in the options-based approach. We need to have this legislation somehow address this change in expectations of educators. With Stop the Bleed training and practices, we're expecting our educators to be EMTs. With an options-based approach, we will now expect educators to make decisions that trained law enforcement officers make. Educators will need training and coaching in this new system. Educators who make life or death decisions in a matter of seconds cannot be held liable in any way. The liability section of Vermont education law must be amended to specifically exempt from any exposure or liability an educator who makes such a decision in a crisis. After participating in the behavioral threat assessment training, I see the value and effectiveness of this approach to prevention. When I see the list of the personnel expected to be on the team, however, I see people who are already overextended and exhausted. Where will our school counselors, school nurses, and school principals find the time to conduct these assessments? These assessments demand urgent and effective data collection, and I'm not confident that all our teams will have the capacity to perform this important function without shortchanging other areas of their work. There should be a mechanism to evaluate a school district's capacity to conduct these assessments with fidelity and then provide administrative or investigative support as needed. Social media posts and digital communications will most likely be part of some individual behavioral threat assessments. We collectively need to further examine the impact that various social media platforms have on school violence, including rampant vandalism. While I do not see how this could be explicitly incorporated into this legislation, it certainly is part of the problem we are all trying to solve. Thank you. Welcome any questions or comments from my colleague.
Paragraph 6, you say, this major change in strategy has caused increased levels of stress and anxiety among our educators. Are you talking about the governor's proposal?
Wherever they implement the options-based. People are talking about options. We've been talking about options-based now for a while.
Okay.
And that whether that's in the law or not, and it does make sense. But the question is, even where it's not implemented, they know that it's coming, and that is the having to make those decisions is something we have not done, and that is a difficult decision.
Is it done in some schools? Do you know? It sounded, I thought the Secretary of Education said that, I don't know if the words make, but some of this was happening at some schools. I'm looking at.
Yeah, I believe some schools are already doing options-based.
Okay.
There's two major programs. One is called Run, Fight, Hide. And the other one's called, it's the ALICE program.
Those programs.
Can't exactly what it stands for, but that's kind of expensive canned program, but a lot of research behind it as well. They're both options-based, where you make a decision based on the evidence you see in front of you. That's what the Safety Council recommended.
And as a strategy, I think Jay would agree, it does make sense. But again, the position that puts the classroom teacher in.
And school leaders.
And school leaders for sure.
Senator Gould.
I just want to say I really appreciate this. I, just from my own personal experience, I mean, I was in a lockdown, spent the better part of the day in a lockdown, but teachers don't go into this profession to do this work. We just don't. Just generally, we want to nurture, we want to teach, we want to provide care and support. We're just not, I don't know how to put it, but this is just not part of what we go into the profession for. And if this is going to be part of it, then we kind of need to just like reevaluate and reassess what this profession is, because this is not what it has been presented to us. It's not what folks are expecting. So this is, I agree that this is a pretty major change that we need to think long and hard about. I just also think, this is just me speaking for me and
Please.
nobody, and I know not everyone's going to agree with me, but the best way to keep kids safe is to keep guns out of the hands of folks who commit crimes. And that's a whole other conversation. But I just, that is my perspective, and from my experience, that is the case.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Yes, please, Senator.
So if it were a voluntary program where some people might want to sign up for it, I know some teachers that view part of their role as protecting their students too. But it's not for everybody. So if you're a leader and you want to step up and take advantage of this program, it makes sense, but it's not for everybody, for sure.
Right, and the way it would work, a voluntary system wouldn't work because it's classroom dependent, right? So we do see people volunteering to be on school safety teams and take leadership roles in that, and that's important. But these decisions will have to be made in every classroom, every school bus, cafeterias, where imagine if you're a supervisor of a cafeteria and all of a sudden you get word that there's a threat. Now, what do you do, right? And so there has to, again, a lot of training has to be there so that when we say options-based, be really clear what those options are. And I think that's one of the main message I want folks to know is that options based on paper or in policy is one thing. How that will play out in the classroom is very different, and it's much more difficult.
It would be helpful to hear from some administrators and faculty who are now doing options-based, if you could help us with that.
We can definitely just.
That'd be great if you would share that with us.
Yeah.
And I know all of you are coming back, or some of you next week, to also give some additional detail on additional testimony. I'm sure this is helpful. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Related to Jay's testimony, just a little fact, the Economic Policy Institute did a study that was called the teacher penalty. Nationally, teachers make 23.5% less than comparable professions, comparable college grads professionals. In Vermont, it is average about 86 cents on the dollar, so closer to a 14% decrease. So when we look at,
Is that in your testimony?
no, that's Jay's.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I just wanted, the question came up in terms of what are some of the reasons why people aren't
Yeah.
going into the profession.
Yeah.
And we know from the research, the surveys that our organization has done, is that the salary, compensation and benefits is usually the top reason. And secondly is the lack of respect and not being part of the distributive leadership model in schools and whatnot. So we can dive into that further.
Share us, send that research to Hayden so we all have a copy of it. That would be very, very helpful.
Sure. Just a quick question on that number. Does that include the long-term pension?
Yeah, they do that work. They do all of the, how they figure that in the report. I could send you the report. They explain all of that. That's, those numbers somehow level it somehow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you would send that to Hayden, I'll take a look at it. If we need you to come back and just walk us through some of the key points, that would be great.
Sure. Well, Jay touched on them, and you know what I mean. I think one of the things that we need to do is to make sure, and I know this was in his written testimony, we need to focus on retention. Because if we retain the educators we have now, if we put in place that will keep educators in the classroom now, that will naturally lead to recruitment. And as a reminder, we always talk about teachers, which is really obviously important, but our education support staff, those professionals who are our paraeducators, school bus drivers, maintenance workers, administrative assistants, that's where we're seeing the greatest vacancies. I think Jay was up to 1,000 vacancies.
Yeah, it was over 1,000 last time I started here. And just to add to that, if I may, those positions are often though that we see more over the course of the years connected to the economy itself.
Yes.
So when the economy is really good, it's actually harder for schools to hire those positions. If the economy is really bad, it's a lot easier to hire for those positions.
Because the EPI study doesn't cover support professionals. If it did, I think you'd find the gap even wider.
Yeah.
Because we have people tutoring high school students. I know one case where a woman tutors a high school student. She's making around $16.90 an hour. And the student she tutors leaves school, goes to work at Tractor Supply and makes $19 an hour. So put that in the what's wrong with this picture
Yeah,
category.
yeah. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thanks.
Committee, thanks. Staff, appreciate it and look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Safe drive if you're traveling.